So if you can come in, if you're outside, take a seat, stand, whatever you prefer. I think we're trying to arrange the registered speakers to come down to the lower area and sit along the back. So if you are registered to speak to us, maybe you could make your way down here to save the time later on. Essentially, that's happening? Okay. Or maybe when we've got people arranged and settled, let me know and we'll start. Probably looks like it needs a few more minutes. Yeah, I think when we've got everyone down, or at least we think we do, and people are settled, we'll kick off. It's going to be a few more minutes. Leafly. Looks like we're making progress. Is there name tags? I don't guess there is. They got those at the front. How are we looking? That looks... What about the online? Are they, as far as we know? Just give me a nod if they're online, because I want to do a check that they can hear us. We're just checking that people online who are joining us can hear us. You think that's working? Is there anyone?
Yes, I can hear.
Oh, good, okay.
There's no visual, but I can hear.
Great. Anyone who is joining us remotely, if you can just put yourselves on mute until you're speaking, that'll be helpful. Thank you. So we're right to start. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the Local Planning Panel Central Coast meeting on the 2nd of August. The meeting is being recorded. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Darkinjung people, traditional custodians and owners of the land, and pay respect to elders past and present, and the ancient culture which they're part. My name's Jason Peregar. I might just ask the panel members to test their recording voices just and introduce themselves.
Yeah, my name is Stephen Leithley. I'm a town planner.
Thanks, Steve.
My name is Lynette Hunt. I'm the community representative.
Stacey Brodbeck. I'm a town planner and urban designer.
And my name's Jason Peregar. I think our name tags are out there. So we're here to consider the determination of one development application for 604 Arimba Creek Road, Palm Grove. I'll ask for any declarations of interest. I understand there aren't any except for Stephen Leithley. You might just mention that it's an insignificant non-pecuniary interest.
Yeah, I declare a non-significant non-pecuniary insignificant interest. The Environmental Health Officer who works for Council has provided advice on this matter I'm related to. We haven't discussed this matter and actually it's been a number of years since we've spoken.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Stephen. Look, the format of today's meeting is unique due to the high number of submissions and interest in the application and in order to be as open and inclusive as possible. We've arranged a hybrid meeting format where we're allowing those who want to attend in person to do that, and that's what's happened, but also those who can't attend in person to attend remotely, and that's also being arranged, and I understand people can hear us. Council staff have registered all speakers who wish to address us or to listen, and that's being facilitated both in person and via a Zoom meeting. As in normal procedures, we will hear from registered speakers who want to address us, and the panel may have questions of speakers. In order to provide some logic and order to the meeting and the prevailing unique format and technology, I've decided to group the registered speakers in order of those who support the recommendation from council staff first, so those supporting the refusal of the application, and in turn, those who are here in person first, and then those attending by Zoom secondly in that order, in that categorisation, and then the registered speakers speaking against the recommendation and for the proposal. After hearing from all the speakers and then testing the panel if we have any questions, the public part of the meeting will close, and then the panel, the four of us, will deliberate for as long as it takes to come to a decision regarding the application. As I mentioned up front, the whole meeting is being voice recorded. I don't believe we're getting video recorded, it's just voice, is that right? Just voice recording, yeah. It's being voice recorded, and the voice recording of the meeting will be uploaded on Council's website. Next, I'm intending to read the speakers list, which I'm not sure I have. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So hopefully this is in the order that I mentioned of those speaking against the recommendation and those for the application. So the names I have, and there's 15, and hopefully all of you are down the bottom. If you're not, if there's anyone who's registered to speak, I'm going to do two things. Just check that the people who are registered to speak are down in the bottom area. And then secondly, any who aren't could make it down. And then I'll also just check if anyone believes they've registered to speak but haven't heard their name. So the names are Gay Murrells, Michael Tatum, sorry for any mispronunciations ahead of time, Brian Davies, Gary Chestnut, then Marie Wilkinson, Patrick Murphy, Greg McGill, John Dawson, Tony Voller, Kay Voller for Tom Madden, Ellie Robertson for Zoe Wall, Sandy Mander for Julie Terry, Lisa Ryan and Sam Tatum. And that's all for the recommendation made by council staff but against the proposal. And then for the applicants and the applicants' representatives, speaking against the recommendation for the proposal, I have Chris Lewis and Jonathan Degenhart. So can I just confirm that there's no one up the top who heard their name that needs to come down? Doesn't look like it. And then secondly, is there anyone who believes they registered to address us that haven't heard their name? No? Good. Okay, thanks. Welcome again. So what I'll do next, and I'll just take a few more minutes just outlining the procedures for today's meeting. I can let you know we've had the benefit of receiving documentation associated with the application. We've also received all the written submissions, including any pro formas. We've had a briefing by council staff, and we've also been to the site. That's in addition to a report from council staff and the attachments associated with that report, which have been made publicly available. Hopefully you've read. It's the application as submitted and the assessment and recommendation by council staff that the panel is considering today. As we've been provided with all submissions, which we've had a chance to review, it's not necessary to read out your submission. It'd also be appreciated if you, that if you do agree with prior points raised, because we do have quite a number of speakers, you don't necessarily need to repeat them in order to give them greater weight. So if you do agree with prior points, by all means say that, but you don't need to keep repeating the same issue for us. We're interested in a range of issues and the issues that will assist us in making our decision based on the merits of and the impacts of the proposal. Speakers have up to 5 minutes each to speak. This is more than the usual amount that panels give of 3 minutes. And I take the view it's better to give 5 minutes because it's invariably people get a minute or potentially 2 as an extension. But in order to be fair and equitable, that's a strict ceiling. It's not to be extended. So you will be reminded when you're approaching your time limit, which is longer than most, and asked to sum up when that's reached. As I mentioned, the panel may have questions, so I'll pause after speakers to see if panel members have any questions. I would ask that mobile phones be turned on silent. Usually the first person who doesn't comply with that. And that people be heard in silence while they're addressing the panel. So please don't interject. I'd ask your microphone to be turned on mute if you're not addressing the panel, if you're joining us remotely. As I mentioned, the whole voice recording will be uploaded on the council's website. Otherwise, there's to be no other recording or filming of this meeting. Such filming or recording needs prior permission, which hasn't been sought or given. Very importantly, there's to be no personal criticism directed at council staff, other speakers, the panel, or people who aren't here. Please be aware this is a public meeting, it's being recorded, and you're responsible for your own comments, so please don't make them slanderous. And also, please don't seek to denigrate others in an attempt to win a perceived argument. This isn't also a question and answer session. So any questions put to the panel will be taken as rhetorical and reflecting an issue of concern as opposed to a question the panel will answer. Similarly, it's not a town hall debate and speakers should not interject or interrupt other speakers. Once your address is ended and any questions exhausted, that's the end of your verbal presentation to the panel. We ask and expect the courtesy and respect to be shown throughout this meeting, and we also ask that people respect other people's views, even if those views don't accord with your own. As mentioned, after hearing from the registered speakers to address the panel any questions, we will close the meeting to deliberate on the item and make a decision. The decision will include reasons for our decision. The reasons for our decision, the audio recording of the meeting will be available on Council's website as soon as practicable. That's usually within days of the meeting. Decisions of the panel, because there's 4 of us, are by majority vote, but if needed, the chair has a casting vote. I'm nearly finished. The application will either be approved, refused or deferred. It's possible the panel may have a different viewpoint or make a different decision than that recommended by council staff. It's also possible that if a matter is deferred, it may be subsequently determined by electronic means without another public meeting. Normally, I'd now invite the speakers in the order, but there is something else I do want to mention, just having read the submissions and the nature of some of the submissions. And that's just to clarify our role, really. I note a large number of submissions have raised the issue of concern regarding the activity of dog breeding and also breeding French bulldogs. You should be aware we're an independent administrative panel. While we're sitting in the place of the council, we are not the council. We're not councillors and we're not politicians. We're an administrative body that makes decisions in accordance with the law. We don't make decisions or recommendations regarding government policy, whether that's about dog breeding or anything else. Any concerns about dog breeding, French bulldogs or otherwise, while they're respected, I'm not trying to dismiss them, they're just not relevant for our deliberations or role as a panel in determining this DA. We live in a democracy, but policy is set by elected representatives, not us. So I just wanted to say that. Now, I think in terms of council, I usually pause here to see if council staff want to raise anything. I think it's been brought to our attention there might have been a typographical error in the DA reference in the recommendation. But apart from that, is there anything council staff want to raise? No, okay, thank you. And thanks council staff for attending. They might be available for questions from the panel as well. So hopefully all of that's clear. We do want to hear your views. We're particularly interested in the range of views and impacts associated with this particular proposal. But we would ask that you do respect other people's views as well. So the first speaker is Gay Murrells.
Good afternoon and thank you, panel members.
We have your presentation. This is yours, Ms Murrells. You only have 5 minutes. There's quite a few slides here, so I'll just be...
I have no slides.
Right, okay.
I live directly across the valley from number 604. After more than 4 years of destructive impact on my family, it's seriously difficult to know where to begin with this. It has been a travesty. How has this impacted on us? It has been the noise. Erratic, high-pitched, irregular, unpredictable barking, at times for 10 or 11 hours a day. And it's not just the noise, it's the anticipation of more noise and the feelings of genuine despair and helplessness associated with no support and inadequate council responses. And we are generally resilient and strong individuals. Despite that, we have struggled to be heard in a system where the applicant has been rewarded on a regular basis for breaking rules and flouting council directives. I never planned to discuss our own health issues and the impact of 4 years of distress, but nothing we've done has made any difference so far, so why not? Because of life-threatening illness in 2 members of our close family, we have seriously needed a place of solace and peace. We have sadly had that taken away from us, and unfortunately, we still need it. As you will know, the salient requirement in the POEO Act is that noise interferes unreasonably. So the term offensive noise could equally well be thought of as unreasonable noise. So our experience and that of other close neighbours clearly fits comfortably within that definition. Aspects of the current council report, particularly the environmental health section, appear to question this. I would like to challenge a number of those statements. A noise diary has been kept since the business started operating in July 2019. This has been kept honestly and accurately. In fact, one of the council officers even commented on the integrity of our approach just recently. To that end, I find it offensive that comments within the report appear to cast aspersions on the veracity of our reporting and even the existence of measurable noise. It was more than 2 years before council officers even visited the property unannounced. May I refer the panel to the detailed 64-page noise diary document which has been provided to council. This gives information about periods of barking, the regular breaching of operation time conditions, and also quiet days within the trial period. Many factors impact on the noise, even the weather. However, the lack of noise on one particular day means nothing. The next day there could be 10 hours of unreasonable noise. The report also considers Condition 216 of the Development Consent, which requires the operator to maintain a complaint handling and dispute resolution register. I was appalled to read that compliance with this condition was acknowledged in the report and must refute this in the strongest of terms. This is an extraordinary statement based on our experiences and documentation. I too have detailed records of the texts and telephone calls attempted. On occasion, it took the manager 2 weeks to respond at all. Many messages received no response, and not once did the manager acknowledge that there was a problem or act to reduce the barking noise. Not once. It actually appeared that the manager was seldom on site, as he frequently referred to the property as there rather than here. Council officers were contacted regularly and were copied with these communications as they happened. By June 2021, I ceased contacting the manager directly, as it was a stressful waste of time with no outcome. The rationale for ceasing direct complaints was communicated to both the manager and council. So, in conclusion, we in the community have followed due process at all times. Central Coast Council's own documentation emphasises the importance of this. The community quite understandably feels abandoned and deserves some kind of equity in the planning system now. This is a final opportunity for the panel to rekindle confidence in process and pull things back to decency and fairness. We hope very much that you will. Thank you.
Ms. Morris, thanks for sticking to time. Questions from the panel?
We are directly across the creek at a raised elevation. I'm not sure how many metres away we are, but it's almost irrelevant, as some of the other speakers will outline to you, because of the shape of the valley and the amphitheatre effect. I can hear voices on our neighbour's veranda. It's like going across water, because there is nothing to stop the sound from where the dogs are positioned directly into our house. I've had occasions with the doors closed, the windows closed, and I can hear dogs barking right at the back of my house. And I've got a little wooden house, so I don't have soundproofing on my house.
Gay, thank you for your presentation today. You said you weren't aware of how far you were from the facility, from your property. We were out on site the other day and the staff pointed out in the direction where your house was,
Yeah.
I believe to the north on the opposite side.
I would say a couple of 100 yards is probably the distance. I need to be correct. I'm not very good at distances. Would you say?
315 metres in terms of the measurement on Google Earth.
And there's vegetation between, because I couldn't see your house from...
The elevation is virtually
I'm asking Gay, thank you.
Yes, the point is the elevation, and a few shrubs are not soundproofing.
But I couldn't, the question I'm making,
Right, I'm sorry,
I couldn't see your house because
No,
of the
you
vegetation.
can't, you
Okay,
can't.
that's all.
We have a privet problem.
Yep, thank you.
If you had walked in over the creek, and it's a shame that so few people have done that, but that if you walked in over the creek, you would see exactly how it's positioned. It's actually very close to the creek. And it's a shame that you didn't take that opportunity to look at where the closest receptors are, because I think that's very significant.
We certainly saw aerial photographs of where
Right,
your
okay.
properties were, okay?
Thank you.
Can I ask it, and don't take this question the wrong way, I guess so what you're saying is because of the unique amphitheatre shape of the valley, that exacerbates noise and you can hear things that would ordinarily be quite quiet. So what do you say to the proposition that if you're in a zone, a rural zone that allows a range of activities of permissible uses, the expectation you shouldn't be able to hear anything given that, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to grapple
Yes, I
with
do.
that, the expectation of what you expect when you move into an area where a range of permissible uses are allowed. And how do you
I
see
think
that fair balance working?
Yeah, I think what you need to do is look at what's around it. And we are right next to Gillaby State Forest and conservation areas. We have the Forest of Tranquility just down the road. A large number of the residents on the road have actually given large portions of their land over for conservation purposes. The entire focus of that area is, I agree, the zoning is an issue, but it's what around it that is the key thing. And that will be raised in another presentation later. So I probably shouldn't go into that in too much detail.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Morris. No more questions? Next
Thanks
we
for the
have,
opportunity.
thank you. Next we have Michael Tatum. So just before you start, Michael, look, if there's any questions from the panel about where you are, we respect your privacy. Don't ever feel compelled you have to say where you live or anything that you're not comfortable saying. We understand anyone's desire for privacy. Sorry,
No,
Mr.
I'm
Tatum.
quite comfortable.
What's that?
Yes, I live directly opposite. I live with Gay. Was that?
Thanks.
Sorry, was that?
No, it
your
wasn't
question?
directed to you. I was just making the general comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Mr. Tatum. If you can start.
Oh, I start. Okay. Change glasses. Yes, as I mentioned, I live directly opposite. And as Gay's mentioned, this has really wasted a good part of the last 4 years of our lives and caused us a great deal of stress and anxiety. I have a few questions. Now, how could anybody purchase a property which is described as a true part of paradise in peaceful Palm Grove and then seek to develop a dog breeding establishment for up to 30 barking dogs? The property, by the way, is now for sale. And how could council have initially refused it, finally approved it, and then after a year of non-compliance, together with a 12-month trial period, which was actually 15 months, trial period that has now been allowed to continue for 2.5 years, 12 months to 2.5 years. And why is this report dated March when in fact we're now in August? This place has been in operation for 4 years, as just mentioned. How can a building certificate on a structure which hasn't been lawfully approved be issued? It isn't a miscible structure. These aren't miscible structures. And now I understand they're just supposed to stand there, these outdoor kennels, sort of a bit like the pyramids, because it's suggested they can't be used. Although, as I say, a building certificate has been issued, and I'm advised that under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, to continue to authorise the use of these structures could undermine the integrity of the planning system. That's in the report, I believe. In fact, the reality is they must be removed. it gets a little worse. Having emailed Council on the 15th of September 2021 to advise that additional construction is now taking place on site, and incidentally in the middle of the breach of the COVID lockdown on building, I get a reply from Council stating that the works incurring at the property have been in accordance with development consent. They weren't. Now, that minor construction that should have been completed within 30 days of the start of the trial period in mid-January 2020, that's what was required, but this was now more than a year and a half later. And this was an entirely different construction for which there was no consent, and that's why we're here. I say, can it get worse? Well, part of this work, including a septic tank trench, which was refused by Council, or was at least was refused approval on the 17th of August 2021, but would appear enforcement didn't know that because, as I've said previously, they said these works occurred under development consent. It gives the impression that different parts of Council don't really know what's going on. This report is full of polished statements focusing on protecting Council's reputation, while residents have been treated, generally speaking, as an inconvenience. The Council sees balance and fair play, in my opinion, as a bit hit and miss, a moving target. Although all the arguments and more against the original DA add to this one, I mean, in terms of the arguments why it should not be allowed, it is a completely different development with a 900% budget increase in cost. Every structure and part of that structure that has been built since the commencement of the trial period must be removed, and I call upon the panel to unanimously recommend this. So I fully support the amended recommendation A1, A2 and A3, and I encourage the panel to support my additional reasons for refusal, as stated. Furthermore, I strongly encourage the panel to support Part B of the community recommendations.
If you could just finish up now, that'd be appreciated.
Containing parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tatum. Any questions? Thank you. No questions.
Oh, done. Okay. Thank you.
Brian Davies. Mr. Davies, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you. Panel members, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here on behalf of Ourimbah Region Residents Association, known as AURA, to strongly endorse the Council recommendation to refuse the application. AURA is a not-for-profit group representing the interests of residents in the 2258 postcode, including Palm Grove. AURA supports compliance with planning laws, but helps residents to call out breaches of those laws. Our membership is keen to support the people adversely affected by this DA. We endorse the arguments, the nearly 1,000 objections, and those put to you by the other speakers today. I too live in a narrow valley, and it's common to hear even a single dog barking from a kilometre away. Breezes blow up and down the valley. It can carry the sound as if it's next door, which in this case for some it already is. But today I'm here to talk about bushfires. Planning for Bushfire Protection 2019 PBP sets standards for designing and building on bushfire-prone land in New South Wales and applies to all development on bushfire-prone land, such as the DA site. A key feature in protecting residential developments and associated ancillary structures is the Asset Protection Zone, APZ. This is a cleared area surrounding the structures that has strict rules about vegetation and materials used for structures within the zone. APZ size is calculated based on the bushfire attack level, BAL, and the slide that you can, the slide prior to this one. Shows the proximity of the red zone to the west and large vegetation not consistent with any APZ for the dwellings and garage. It indicates a large bale value as bushfires usually approach from the west and northwest. The bale and required APZ are calculated by an RFS accredited bushfire consultant in a bushfire report that is a prerequisite for considering consent on such land. Page 20 of the Council report makes clear that no report has been provided. The proposed modification does not provide any additional information addressing PBP in terms of the additional works undertaken on the site without consent. Other missing mandatory requirements follow. Although the image shows the site prior to development is completed without consent, you can see the garage is actually located within the red zone. The new structures extend out in or very close to the red zone. PBP regarding complying development states a BAL certificate must be obtained, stating that the development is not located in BAL 40 or BAL FZ. The development must also meet the identified development standards within the relevant SEP or LEPs. No such certificate has been presented for this DA, so a DA is required prior to construction. Also on page 20, it is recommended that fences in BAL 29 areas be constructed of non-combustible materials. The current fencing is timber. In fact, the treated softwood fencing is a clear breach of PBP. Slide 3, that's up there now, shows that RFS considers the whole site as bushfire prone. PBP states the requirement that fencing and gates are constructed in accordance with section 7.6. It states all fences in bushfire prone areas should be made of either hardwood or non-combustible material. However, in circumstances where the fence is within 6 metres of a building or in areas of BAL 29 or greater, they should be made of non-combustible material only. So the next slide shows the extent of the breaches that may intrude into the already inadequate APZ for the house, potentially invalidating bushfire approvals for the house. APZs must be maintained in perpetuity. To settle the question of whether the APZ conditions have been invalidated, a new bushfire port is required. Then, because the DA is located more than 200 metres from the nearest public through road, there's a mandatory requirement to refer the matter to RFS for a determination. In the absence of that determination, any consent authority must refuse consent. All of these matters mean the DA must be refused and cast doubt on the validity of the building information certificates for non-complying structures. In conclusion, ORA strongly recommends that the application be refused in accordance with Council's amended recommendations A1, A2 and A3, along with the following additional reason, and that's shown on the next slide. You can read the text on the slide. These dogs are being placed in a life-threatening situation unnecessarily as the site is completely unsuitable. The last things we need are for emergency services to risk their lives to save the dogs or see them die an agonising death by incineration. Thank you. It's actually Davies. It's a bit like the UK pronunciation of Davies. It can sometimes be called Davies.
Yes, Mr Davies.
Yep.
Did Davis or Davies?
Davies.
Davies.
Yep.
Right.
Brian, will do.
You said that this development requires approval from the RFS.
I said that at the moment there is a clear breach of PBP. That treated pine fence is illegal. It extends to within 3 metres of building.
So your submission isn't that this requires approval from the RFS,
Well, I'm saying that if you look at the structures, they actually come into, well, I can't tell you exactly where the APZ is, but I can recognise that the BAL level of this is going to be very significant.
Yes,
So
yes or just yes or no. Are you saying that this requires approval from the RFS? Yes or no?
I'm saying yes.
So it's the only development that requires approval from the RFS is development classified as special fire protection development, and dog boarding, breeding, training establishments such as this isn't special.
My argument is that those structures illegally reach into the APZ of the house, and so there are breaches of the APZ which must be maintained in perpetuity. And because of those breaches, there needs to be a new bushfire report, which then needs to be referred to RFS. Because of the requirement that the house is more than 200 metres from a public through road. So PBP contains a condition saying if it's more than 200 metres from a public through road, it must be referred to RFS.
Okay.
Other questions?
Sorry, I just had one, Mr. Davies. You said you were representing a group of people. Could you just clarify the name of that?
It's Ourimbah
Ourimbah?
Region Residents Association.
Sorry, what was the second word? Ourimbah
Region
Region Residents
and
Association.
Residents Association.
Okay.
And it's references the region because it's the 2258 postcode, which isn't just Ourimbah, it's sort of the Palm Grove Valley, Palmdale, and other areas surrounding.
And how many people would be in that
Sorry?
association? How many people are in that association?
We currently have about 100 members, but our reach is, well, up to about 1,500.
Okay. And for something like this, would people have to vote that they support what you're saying, or?
Yes, we discussed it at our meetings, and so we had a meeting and they were supportive. They've been supportive of the Palm Grove community right through this process. And we're here based on a motion at the meeting to say that.
Okay,
they
thank you
were
for
interested
clarifying.
support. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Next, I think I have Gary Chestnut. You might have noticed in the top of the screen there's a time limit. So people have been good sticking to that time limit. So if you can self-regulate yourselves by keeping an eye on that, that would be appreciated. And the other thing I've noticed, it's a little bit hard for us to hear. So if you're able to either speak up a little or get closer to the mic, it might help the hearing of both the panel and others. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Gary Chestnut. I've been employed by Palm Grove Community. I fully endorse the council recommendation that the application to delete condition 1.2 be refused for the reasons below. On page 10, which is currently on your screen, the council report, I do not agree with the statement that the development is near Ourimbah State Forest. In fact, if you look at the slide, you'll see that it is nestled between a nature reserve on one side and state conservation area on the other side. I now direct your attention to the next slide. On page 18 of the report, it identifies that very limited information has been submitted with the application. I totally agree and support this recommendation, with the correction that in recommendation number 2, that the word clause should read section. On the next slide, on page 18 of the council report, it explains that the use of the modification provisions to continue to rectify unauthorised works is inconsistent with the legal principles. I believe the panel should send the clearest message possible to the community that breaches of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act are not acceptable. I request the panel to consider a new recommendation presented on slide 4. I now go on to slide 5. I note on page 20 of the council report, it identifies that council is unable to consider the impacts of the development in terms of the relevant planning instruments, plans and policies. I believe the council is unable to assess the relevant impacts, that this should be stated for a reason for refusal. I would request the panel consider a new recommendation presented on slide 5. Unfortunately, on page 22 to 23 of the council report, which is on slide 6, I do not agree with how the current emphasis on the current assessing officer has addressed the zoning objectives of RU1 primary production, in particular, the zoning objective to minimise conflict between land uses within this zone and land use within adjoining zones. I draw the panel's attention to the next slide. This is slide number 7. The current assessing officer comes to the position that the surrounding land use is generally rural, residential, concludes no conflict with the zoning objectives except for noise. However, as you see in the zoning map slide, 77% of the area in this figure is conservation, not rural residential. As the surrounding zoning is not rural residential, I would like to draw the panel's attention to recommendation 2 of the council report of the 1st of October 2020. Although historically the panel ignored the 2023 recommendation, this recommendation should be reconsidered by the current panel, as the trial, in my opinion, has clearly identified that the land use conflicts between adjoining zones exist. I would therefore request the panel consider the recommendation presented on slide 8, which is the same wording as the recommendation 2 in the Council report of the 1st of October 2020. On the next slide 9, unfortunately again on page 22 of the Council report, I do not agree with how the current assessing officer concludes that the approved development is situated in a way that does not detract from the local rural outlook. As you can see on slide 10, the Council report on the 1st of October concluded the exact opposite in that the site size, attributes, location was not suitable for an animal boarding and training facility. I request the panel adopt the recommendation that was ignored in 2020. Now, on the next series of slides is a series of complete list of community recommendations. As I'm limited for time, other members of the community will explain the rationale. Alternatively, I'm very happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Mr Chestnut. Questions? No. Thanks for the slides. Thank you. And now I have Marie Wilkinson. If I've got that close.
Good afternoon. My name is Marie Wilkinson. I endorse the council recommendation that the application to delete condition 1.2 be refused for the following reasons. Any submissions made in accordance with the Act or regulations, you'll note the council report on page 25 states a total of 1,081 submissions were received. Of these submissions, there were a total of 87 letters of support, 91 individual objections and 903 submissions in the form of a pro forma objection. I sort of say that information relating to the submissions and the copy of the recommendations reviewed by council is both superficial and under a statement of lodgements. Animal Liberation confirmed 993 pro forma objections received through their systems. These submissions reflect the overwhelming public interest surrounding the welfare and well-being of animals, which has received scant attention by the council. Also in the report, council officers then list receiving 93 individual objections. From the 93 individual objections, the officer identifies 18 issues. Public officer then lists receiving 11 submissions from local residents living within the vicinity, with 2 supporting and 9 objections, with an additional objection from a consultant on behalf of the community. The council officer lists 9 issues stated that all issues have been considered above, and that's not the case. You are in actual receipt of the community recommendations. I'm not going to read every single one out to you because I haven't got enough time, obviously. But the DA has provided insufficient information to adequately assess the acoustic impacts. You'll hear a presentation with regards to acoustics and topography of the valley itself. If you look at point 4, in terms of 4.2, the observed land use conflicts between adjoining zones as inconsistent with the zoning objectives of RU1, primary production having regards to section 4.151A1 of the Environmental Planning Assessment Act, and also number 3, the site size, attributes and location are not suitable for the animal boarding and training establishment for dog breeding, having regard for that section 4.151C of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. So there are a number of other conditions, recommendations from the community. I draw you to point 8 on following slide 6. The subject application does not contain sufficient detail to all for consideration of the impact of the development in terms of the relevant planning instrument plans and policies in accordance with section 4.151 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1975, which was introduced by Gary. Part B, Mike has spoken about that, and notwithstanding Obviously, council is aware that point 3 is aware that several structures have been erected on the site without consent. Council received an application for a building information certificate, BIC, reference BC 482020, in respect to the unauthorised structures. Council issued a BIC for the structures listed in that BC, although the council has issued a BIC for the structures. BIC does not authorise the use of the buildings or the land. Any use of the buildings or land requires approval in accordance with the planning provisions contained in Central Coast. And then you'll notice there's a note there. Any use of the buildings or land requires approval in accordance with the planning provision contained in Central Coast Local Environment Plan 2023. Obviously, I'm running out of time, so it's important, I think, to remember and refer to the mandatory criteria decision makers must consider basing their decisions on Section 4.15 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act of 1979, which expressly requires and compels CCC and LPP as the consent authorities to consider the public interest and the welfare of the animals.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Wilkinson? No, doesn't look like it. Patrick Murphy?
Hello, Patrick Murphy from the Animal Justice Party. Good afternoon, council staff and community members. I come here today to verbally register my objection to development application DA 97 2020A for the use of existing premises for an animal boarding and training facility, dog breeding, also known as a puppy farm. I've also registered my objection via a written submission. It is very obvious there is a high level of community concern over this puppy farm, as there have been a total of 1,083 submissions received by council. To demonstrate the concern in comparison to state matters, which have had petitions signed, not submissions, just petition signatures, there have been the following. Do not raise the Warragamba Dam wall, 174 signatures. Ban single-use coffee cups, 240 signatures. Stopping logging and extended national parks, 664 signatures. End rodeo cruelty, 805 signatures. The only state issue that received more signatures was the shooting of Kosciuszko Brumbies with 1,778 signatures. If council need look any further for evidence as to the community concerned about this puppy farm, then they need look no further. We know, as noted in the meeting notice for today, the site has been used partly in accordance with consent. However, alterations and additions have been carried out in association with the use without consent. Work has been undertaken on the site without approval. An example of this is when an application for the installation of an on-site sewage management system was lodged with council in August 2021. The assessment revealed that the on-site sewage management system had been unlawfully installed and retrospective approval for construction of the system could not be issued. Eventually, an approval to operate the system was issued and the system is now considered to be a competent installation. The applicant has applied correctly under the Wyong Local Environment Plan and other relevant legislation, but they have a shed called an evening house, installed pens, external kennels, and installed illegal sewage systems during the 15-month trial period that started in December 2020. Just because someone has built a facility, then applied under the correct legislation, it shouldn't mean an automatic green light from council. They've taken the attitude of build it and they will approve it. This matter has been ongoing for 4 years. The owner has treated the council, the residents and the ratepayers with total contempt for fair and due process by initially setting up their operation illegally and building 10 kennels, which were not part of the initial DA, then adding a large area of paling fence and hoping that it could be included separately when it was designed to be part of the exercise area for the dogs, which was initially temporarily approved for 140 metres squared, but has since been increased to 1,500 metres squared by the owner. This is a concerning matter, as it goes to show the character of the owner of this facility and their complete disregard when it comes to following the due process. This owner is deliberately riding roughshod over council, and their actions show they think that they are above the law and can do whatever they please with impunity. We already have an excess of dogs on the Central Coast. There are pounds that are struggling to find homes for the animals they have. We do not need more animals bred into existence when there is already an oversupply. Council is paying good money from ratepayers' funds for the animal care facilities on the Central Coast. Why should council encourage more animals to be bred when we simply can't deal adequately with the ones we have at the moment? That's rhetorical. Until this problem is overcome, the future of any new puppy farms on the Central Coast should be put on ice until the pounds are empty and the demand for supply has a waiting list. These dogs are literally being exploited for their reproductive systems, forced to pump out litter after litter of designer puppies for profit. And there is no genuine care for the dogs. They only care about whether or not they are healthy enough to produce more babies to sell. They are not breeding machines. They are mothers who do not want to see their babies taken away from them again and again. If approved, they'll be operating in an unsupervised environment. What makes you think they'll be able to abide with any obligation council imposes upon them? Clearly, they do not have the morals to comply with any obligation placed on them, as their previous actions have shown, and the unethical nature of their business reinforces that view. Furthermore, in concluding, if council approves this DA, the message they will be sending out to the community is, don't worry about Central Coast Council. They are soft, they don't even enforce their own legislation, they are a joke, and you can simply bulldoze over them by ignoring whatever they tell you and doing what you want to do. What is preventing from another breeding facility from setting up shop tomorrow? Therefore, the only logical thing to do is deny this application and send out a strong message to future applicants that the Central Coast Council takes their legislation seriously.
Thanks, Mr. McGill. Any questions? No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
John Dawson? Mr. Did I? Greg McGill. Yeah. What were you saying? Yeah, that's what I thought. We're on John Dawson, aren't we? What happened? Did I? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I'm Greg McGill now, are we? Sorry, I jumped one. Sorry, Mr. McGill. And Mr. Murphy, sorry, I inadvertently jumped over you and got the names wrong. Mr. McGill.
Sorry, I appreciate he may be better looking than me, but...
My eyesight, I'm afraid.
Mr Chairman, Planning Panel members, I speak to you today on behalf of the Ourimbah Region Residents Association and residents of Ourimbah to strongly endorse Central Coast Council's report recommendation that the application to delete condition 1.2 be refused in relation to DA 97/2020/A, located at 604 Ourimbah Creek Road, Palm Grove. In speeches already given and proposed to be given by other residents at this hearing today, you will be presented with a myriad of compelling reasons as to why this dog breeding and training facility should not be approved. In my case, I wish to focus my presentation on retrospective approvals being sought by the applicant. From the outset, the applicant has totally ignored obtaining consent approvals prior to constructing and operating this facility. This is totally unacceptable. Initially, one may argue that this was just an oversight by the owner of the property. However, there are now 4 incidences where this has occurred. Firstly, the dog breeding, boarding and training facility commenced operation without council consent, with this planning panel giving retrospective consent for a trial period of 15 months, which I understand expired in March 2021. Secondly, the owner constructed a large outdoor undercover dog facility adjacent to the exercise yards, again without council consent. Thirdly, the statement of environmental effects included a request for retrospective approval of a treated pine paling fence around the perimeter of the outdoor dog facilities, that the developer directed contractors to construct first without obtaining consent. And fourthly, an on-site sewerage management system comprising of a buried septic system relating to wastewater from the dog breeding facility has been installed, Again, may I say, without prior council consent. It is normal practice for different stages of the installation of the sewage management system to be inspected and approved prior to proceeding to the next stage. This ensures all conditions are verified as meeting the necessary requirements during construction, prior to its approval and subsequent burial. Now, how can a buried sewage system be retrospectively approved? On 24 November 2021, Council served an order associated with an unauthorised sewage system. However, Council then proceeded to licence the operation of the system. This has effectively delivered to the developer what was initially requested through retrospective approval. Clearly, the property owner has no regard for planning rules, and one can only construe that he expects retrospective approval is a fait accompli. At best, this behaviour can be described as habitual and at worst, contemptuous. As planning panel members, I urge you to adopt Council's recommendation in this report to this hearing. To do otherwise and again approve these building works retrospectively will result in a loss of public confidence in the whole planning framework and process, as well as rewarding the owner for his continued unlawful conduct. With regards to this unapproved work being carried out on the subject property, I note that the council report refers to the Windy Drop-Down versus Warringah Council Land and Environment Court decision in 2000. Whilst I consider it unnecessary to outline the full details of the case in this talk, as I'm sure that panel members, you are all fully conversant with it, I note that the council report relating to this DA states that, and I quote, the use of the modification provisions to continually to rectify unauthorised works and to authorise the use of those works via an amended consent is considered inconsistent with the legal principle laid down in the Windy Drop-Down judgment and could undermine the integrity of the planning system. In fact, I would go further and say would undermine rather than could undermine public confidence and integrity in the planning system. In other words, would it pass the often referred to pub test? As a frequenter of a number of hotels over the years, I can assure you that retrospective approval sought this unauthorised work on these 3 subsequent occasions is totally unacceptable. In conclusion, I also wish to emphasise the owner's consent for this planning assessment process, as according to the council report, is still to provide adequate information to identify and address the likely impacts of the development, notwithstanding the trial period was approved 2.5 years ago. In addition, the subject application does not contain sufficient detail for consideration of the impacts of the development in terms of the relevant planning instruments, plans and policies. Finally, while not addressing these items directly in this submission due to time constraints, I fully support Council's amended recommendations A1, A2 and A3, together with new conditions A7 and A9, as contained in their report to this planning panel hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McGill. Any questions? Thank you. Sorry for the mix-up at the beginning. Oh, we do have a question. Sorry, Mr McGill, there might have been a question I missed. Given you a hard time today, haven't I? So I think I was just, confirm the association's name.
Oh, okay. It is the Ourimbah Region Residents Association Incorporated, the same one that Mr. Brian Davies referred to.
Same as the previous gentleman's representative. Yep.
Yes, Brian Davies, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr McGill. Next is John Dawson, I believe.
I won't take up much of your time. This submission is on behalf of my sister, who lived next door to the 604 Rimba Creek Road, Palm Grove property. My sister is intellectually disabled and has lived at 570 Rimba Creek Road for 74 years. I have been a carer since her mother passed away in 2004. Her house is approximately 200 metres from the dog facility and even closer to the exercise yard. Since the dog facility opened up next door in 2019, it has been a source of irritating noise Prior to the property being sold to the present owners, and property has never been a problem regarding noise or other issues. The outburst of the barking from the dogs has severely disrupted and distressed my sister's life. The noise of the barking dog caused my sister to constantly withdraw inside the house and shut the doors. She was of the opinion that because of the constant barking, the dogs were in some sort of distress or being mistreated. She could not understand why they would bark for so long. The noise was worse when the dogs were outside in the exercise yard. Recently, my sister's condition deteriorated and she had to be placed in permanent care. I strongly believe that the continual barking of the dogs hastened the need for permanent care. She could not be convinced that the continually barking was normal for a group of dogs. At present, I am worried about the impact of the noise from the dogs on my sister's future financial security. Being in permanent care, she will have to sell or lease the property to pay the cost of the care. I believe that she will have to accept less money due to the noise from the dog facility. Her great nephew is at present living in the house and recently has been placed on shift work. He is finding it hard to sleep during daylight hours due to the noise. I find it very difficult to accept that a business can come into an area and disrupt the surrounding neighbours to the point that their health may be affected. On my sister's behalf, I therefore support the recommendation to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I have one. I could have asked this earlier as well. Just trying to get a better handle on the nature of the noise and how often is it more common at certain times of day? Is it an issue or not an issue at night? Has it improved with the construction, albeit unauthorised, of the night house? Can you just explain the nature of the noise impacts that you're experiencing and any patterns that you've noticed?
Well, the main patterns of the noise, it was inconsistent from day to day, but the main pattern of the noise is early in the morning and particularly early on when the dogs were let out for exercise. I imagine this is what they were let out for exercise. There was a lot of barking there and in the afternoon. I don't know whether it was feeding time or whether it was exercise or what it was, but round about in mid-morning or early morning and then in the afternoon was the main period of the noise. It wasn't every day, it wasn't noticed. I live probably a kilometre down the road. I don't hear very much there, but my sister's place, which is elevated probably slightly above the level of the dog farm, it certainly is very loud there.
And when you mentioned earlier on, and these aren't questions to try and trap in anyone, I'm just trying to understand how things are and how they might have changed or what patterns there are, but has it improved over time? Has night time ever been an issue? Or
Well, when it first came in, it was horrendous. And I believe the owners probably tried to do something about it when complaints came. And yeah, it did improve slightly, but it's still not good. And what, as I say, my main worry is trying to get someone to rent the place when you've got dogs barking all day. And just like my grandson who's living there now, he works in the hospital at Gossett as a radiologist and he's on night shift, and he was down at my place the other day complaining that he had to shut all the doors and try and it's an old house and it's very difficult to keep the noise out.
Right. Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if your mic's on. We're just going to... Oh, there it is, the red light. Thanks.
Yeah, my name is Tony Voller. I live at 628 Arimba Creek Road, next door to 604, and I strongly support Council's recommendation to refuse the application. As a neighbour, during different times of the day can be an eruption of noise from numerous dogs barking at the same time, and it demands attention. It definitely interrupts the peace and amenity of the area, and it is offensive. Why is the noise from this facility so irritating to neighbours? The site is not suitable for numerous dogs that are associated with the dog breeding facility. The site comprises many neighbours in close proximity to the dog breeding facility. And the topographic features in this part of the valley are narrow and shaped like an amphitheatre that radiates noise from the site of the dog breeding facilities. You can see from the photo that radiating effect, that behind, on the left-hand side, where I've got the DA inserted, the text, that hill rises, and to the right of where the house is, it's quite flat. So, and I will go to show you the contours in terms of that particular topography, but it is like an amphitheatre. In terms of proximity of the houses, this particular slide illustrates that. There are 3 houses that are in the vicinity of 300 metres or less from the dog facilities, with the nearest house only 240 metres away. And that was the house that John... Sorry, if we can just go back to the previous set, thanks. There are 6 houses closer than 500 metres from the dogs, and 13 houses that are within 900 metres of the dogs. The sound coming from in the valley itself, being a narrow valley, is very interesting. Like Gay Morrell said, it is possible to have a clear conversation with neighbours on the opposite side of the creek. Slide 3, please. In terms of the properties, the closest properties, the arrow is where the dog facilities are, and the other symbols are the location of houses. And the contours, it's interesting that the 4 houses surrounding are on a similar elevation to where the dog facilities are. And I'll better illustrate that then with the next slide. So just highlighting those contours. The contour around about 30 metres above sea level is to the right of the arrow where the dog facilities are, and the one to the left is 40 metres above sea level. So you can see the location of the nearest houses, all at similar elevation to the dog breeding facility. Also, a note then is the curvature of the contours around in the vicinity of the dog breeding facility. And that then provides an amphitheatre effect. And this combined, the shape of the contours and the similar elevation provides then little obstruction from noise to travel to those houses. The question was asked earlier, and it'd only be the tops of the trees that would be intercepting noise. Otherwise, it's direct. So in terms of it, the nuisance of the noise is made worse when the neighbouring houses are of similar elevation, like I said, with little or no obstruction to intercept it. The dog breeding facilities are in a site that does act like an amphitheatre. In terms of the conclusion, number 5. So in conclusion, I strongly recommend that, or support Council's recommendation to refuse the application, and particularly in light of the site being in a natural amphitheatre, resulting in the potential amplification of noise, which has not been adequately assessed or considered during the 15-month trial.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Voller. Any questions? No, thank you. Thanks for the site. Next is Kay Voller, on behalf of Tom Matten, I understand.
I'm reading this for Mr Tom Madden, and I live at 628 Arimba Creek Road. I live at 570 Arimba Creek Road, next door to the dog facility at 604, and I support Council's recommendation to refuse the application. Prior to moving in last year, I was aware of the effect on the previous occupant, my great aunt. I now understand the impact on her of the barking dogs, and I was surprised how bad the barking noise is. I work as a radiologist at Gosford Hospital, and I do night shift work. When the dogs bark, it is a massive inconvenience to my sleep schedule. They wake me up when I'm sleeping during the day after I've done night shift. As a radiographer, it is important that I am well rested prior to working. I deal with radiation and constantly have to be conscious of my actions, as it may affect a patient's outcome and subsequently life. Thus, these dogs barking during both the morning and afternoon hinder the care of my patients, not to mention my own health. Therefore, I support Council's recommendation to refuse the application. Thank you.
I might just have a question. Have you got any comments to make about the nature of noise and patterns that you've noticed? I guess that's a question I'm interested in.
Yes, the noise is very annoying, especially in those times when they move them. There was a lot of noise too when they were using the second house as a place to have the dogs, and they had them outside, and that barking was terrible. But often, only last week, there was still one dog at least barking quite loudly and noisily, especially out in the outside yards. Yes, the noise is horrendous at times.
Thank you. Next is Ellie Robertson, Zoe Wall. Take your time whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ellie Robertson, and I'm speaking on behalf of Zoe Wall, an Arimba Valley resident currently in the UK. This matter is also important to me personally, and that's why I lodged an objection, why I have organised to travel here today from southwest Sydney, and believe me, that wasn't easy, and why I also attended last October's peaceful protest, again here, opposing this facility and calling for urgent action. I'm not affected by the noise from this commercial dog breeding facility, but as a compassionate person, able to comprehend cruelty to animals when I see it, able to discern right from wrong, and able to understand evidence and facts, I am greatly impacted by it. So I would like to reiterate broad community opinion about how we regard and treat animals. I'm now continuing with Zoe's message. Having spoken with hundreds of local community members over the past 4 years, I can tell you the existence and effects of this profit-focused dog breeding facility is abhorrent to the community, and that's why our campaign against it began. Every community member I've talked with, without exception, wants it shut down. We were all shocked. This dog breeding venture moved into the valley and now totally appalled it's still operating 4 years on. When the proprietor relocated his existing dog breeding business to the valley, he had the audacity to tell neighbours it was a hobby. Actually, last year on Gumtree and elsewhere, he advertised French bulldogs for some obscene prices, some at $36,000 each. This is no hobby. French bulldogs are trendy and expensive. We expect this profit-driven DA to be assessed with you, the panel, using your decision-making powers to mandate to consider community benefit or lack thereof. This business only benefits the operator and totally ignores and disregards community interest as exemplified by over 1,000 objections. A well-attended protest outside of these offices, ongoing media meetings with the council staff, planning heads, MPs, and why we are still campaigning now. We know decision-making about planning matters is restrictive and does not yet include consideration of animal welfare. However, the overwhelming public interest about the welfare of these dogs is reflected in nearly 1,000 of the objections lodged to this DA. Sorry, I haven't got my reading glasses. Just bring it over to be in line. Yeah. This dog business is largely anonymous, without road signage, because consumers don't visit. It's unpalatable for consumers to know their cute pup has come from a commercial and intensive outlet. These puppies are bred from mothers who are artificially inseminated and they cannot give birth naturally. This is their entire life until they are discarded, when they are no longer commercially profitable. So this innocuous-looking property is where the proprietor had the gall to boast in his December 2021 DA that dog stalls are now replacing dog cages. We don't know about you, but we don't associate dogs with stalls and cages. Sluiced out, artificially inseminated, mass-produced, as the industry calls it, stack and rack. And remember this term when we are talking about sentient beings and man's best friend.
I'll just ask you to finish up if you can.
It's why I feel sick every time I drive past the site to reach my home. Dogs in loving and homely surroundings don't continually make noise. The many years of noise complaints demonstrates an important animal welfare and public interest consideration. This barking, crying, and whining reflects unhappy dogs.
So can I just ask if you've got any more comments just to summarise those and adopt one or two rather than keep reading because you are over time?
Yeah, the types of commercial ventures are not in line with broad public expectations. And it's my view, and this is for Zoe Hall, that this particular DA is not approved.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No, thank you. Next, I believe, is Sandy Mander for Julie Terry.
Good afternoon. My name is Sandy Mander, speaking on behalf of Julie Terry of 50 Moores Point Lane, Palm Grove, who is unable to attend today. My husband and I reside east of 604 Ourimbah Creek Road with our home at a high elevation directly across the valley from the subject premises. The distance between our homes would be approximately 500 metres. We purchased our property for the peaceful location. There are sounds that one can become accustomed to, such as bird calls, cows mooing, tractors mowing, However, the noise of the barking dogs is something that is not easily ignored, as it is at times piercing and sustained, annoying at the least and distressing at worst. We have personally heard the dogs barking for hours at a time during the day. As ratepayers, we find the disregard for the processes that citizens are expected to follow for development disturbing and unjust. We hope that the planning panel can endorse the refusal of the DA so that justice will prevail. Specifically, I wish to address the panel on the matter of the time taken for the assessment of the DA. On page 7 of the council report in PDF format, it states, the application was reported to the panel for determination on the 1st of October 2020 with the application recommended for refusal. The matter was deferred at the meeting. This statement does not contain the full story. On page 5 of the supplementary report to the planning panel in 2020, it states, it is recommended that a 12-month trial period be imposed and be the most favourable outcome for all parties by allowing the premises to operate and demonstrate minimal impact to the surrounding community with the implementation of new control measures as per the Plan of Management and amended dog kennel plan, whilst still providing further assessment requirements for the objecting community members. This is due to offensive noise being difficult to determine by an acoustic consultant who is basing their assessment of modelling noise from the source to the sensitive receivers. It was therefore the council staff who recommended a 12-month trial, whereas the planning panel adopted a 15-month trial. One can infer perhaps that the planning panel adopted a 15-month trial to allow an additional 3 months to enable council to assess the DA modification application. The 3 months of assessment time given by the planning panel to council has exploded into 19 months. That is 1.5-year assessment nightmare. This is longer than the original 15-month trial. Although over 1,000 submissions were received, this is not a justification for an assessment time of 1.5 years. Having an assessment time of 1.5 years, the community can only conclude that council is broken and it is up to the Central Coast Local Planning Panel to bring natural justice into its decision. In light of this, I would request that the planning panel give consideration to adopting the amended council recommendations A1, A2 and A3. Part A, that the application for modification of development application number DA 97-2020A be refused for the following reasons. 1, the 15-month trial has demonstrated that the animal boarding and training establishment for dog breeding has resulted in unreasonable and significant noise impacts and has detracted from the amenity of residents in the locality. 2, inadequate information to identify and address the likely impacts of the development as required by section 4.151B of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979 as follows. The development has provided insufficient information to adequately assess and address the acoustic impacts on neighbouring properties. And 3, the continued use of the site for an animal boarding and training establishment, dog breeding, at the subject site is not in the public interest, having regard for the submissions received, having regard to sections 4.151F and 4.151E of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Finally, you have today asked several of the speakers to give you an idea of the specific noise. I refer you to the 64-page noise diary log, which was presented to the panel, which provides an extensive and fair description and also sets out numerous breaches of the consent conditions. And I would like you, if you just did, to take a few moments to have a look at each one of those. It will give you a very clear understanding of the impact. Thank you.
Any questions? No, thank you. Lisa Ryan. Oh, online. Oh, we're only on lines. Thanks, Lisa. If you can hear me, hopefully you can. I think you might be
Yes,
LR. Great. We're
I
all.
can hear you, and a staff member is going to operate the slide. So slide 1.
Yep.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Ryan, and I am Animal Liberation's Regional Campaigns Manager. I speak to you today on behalf of Animal Liberation and 993 of our supporters who lodged a formal objection. I also personally have significant experience with these types of dog breeding facilities. Slide 2, please. I do not subscribe to speaking for voiceless. These dogs have voices for those who choose to listen, and yet in this instance, the dogs' voices have all been ignored during the assessment. From the locals, I have listened to and witnessed the tears, the highs, the lows, and at times the dismay and palpable anger. I too have experienced this range of human emotions and feeling powerless and frustrated against a wall of disinterest, deflections, half answers, non-answers, and out-of-date and inadequate legislation, including the planning laws that we are examining today. I have also spoken with consumers of these dogs and have been distressed and shocked by what I have heard and documents I have personally received. Slide 3. We endorse Council's report recommendations to refuse this DA modification, and we would also encourage the panel to reach a unanimous refusal decision, and in this instance include clear steps to dismantle all non-consented infrastructure. A refusal decision must resonate with sound evidence and conclusive rationale, leaving no room for doubt. Accordingly, we contend the proposed reasons for refusal in Council's report are in need of amendment and tweaking, because at present they fail to clearly illustrate the reasons for refusal and the 4-year history with this facility. Based on significant evidence, this is not about the potential to detract or that it will detract. The noise has detracted and impacted amenity for 4 long years. Again, based on evidence, this is not about the development providing insufficient information regarding acoustic impacts. In spite of repeated opportunities, the proprietor has failed to provide the requested information to council staff. The use of the unauthorised outdoor exercise yard has resulted in adverse noise impacts to neighbouring properties, and yet it has not been considered or assessed by an acoustic consultant. The evidenced history of non-compliance by the proprietor must also be included as a reason for refusal. The reasons for refusal must directly relate to Section 4.15 of the EP&A Act and the clear failure by the applicant to identify, respond to and address risks, impacts and cumulative impacts, or to demonstrate satisfactory mitigation measures. The public interest also extends well beyond the submissions received. There is an overwhelming body of evidence that concludes the New South Wales public oppose these facilities, and Council's record of 903 submissions is inaccurate. We contend 903 submissions were put forward by individuals who should not be deemed or classified as a pro forma. This DA and the DA modification has no planning merit and we contend never has had. Next slide, please. I have outlined the serious compliance issues that have been ongoing for a 4-year period. This facility was established without planning consent, as it previously occurred in another New South Wales LGA. The matter regarding the septic and the retrospective approval has already been addressed. In spite of the planning trial period ending some lengthy period of time ago, the operator has not ceased operations. In short, this planning facility and the assessment and the decisions made have made a mockery of New South Wales planning regime, and we maintain the New South Wales public deserve and demand better. Next slide.
You're just over your time here, so I'll ask you to we can see the slide, but if you just want to make your final points quickly, that'd be appreciated.
Council's report fails to illustrate the accurate history here. There has been a document submitted to council staff which has not been included in this report, and it involves 610 breaches.
Ms
by
Ryan,
the
I'm just
operator.
asking you to summarise. We can see the screen. Can I just ask you now directly, can you just finalise your last points in summary without reading?
Okay. There are no limit of conditions that the panel could put forward that would stop ongoing breaches. It is imperative that the panel reach a refusal decision and take steps to dismantle all illegal infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Ryan. Questions from the panel? I guess I've got one, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but is your organisation fundamentally opposed to puppy farms or is there a situation where you could see you to be supportive of such a facility somewhere else, or not?
No, we haven't, but all of the facilities that we have been involved in, including myself over 3 decades, so 30 years experience, have all been set up without planning consent, where councils have failed to take compliance and enforcement action, and where there has been significant animal welfare issues with the dogs and strong objections by local communities. So that's 30 years experience. It is also important to recognise that Animal Liberation is an animal rights organisation that should not deflect from the fact that 997, nearly 1,000 of our supporters lodged submissions. We provide the largest voice here representing the community and New South Wales public, and that needs to be factored in.
Okay, thank you. No more questions? Great. Thanks, Ms Ryan. Next, I also assume is electronically, Sam Tatum.
Thank you very much. Just confirming you can hear me.
Yes, we can, thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, panel members. My name is Sam Tatum, and I've been living directly across the valley from 604 Rimba Creek Road. Today I'll be speaking specifically about the acoustic impact of the development and what I believe are, firstly, flaws in the current reporting, secondly, issues with the data collection methods, and thirdly, what appears to be a lack of equal representation of the information that's now available. So firstly, with respect to current reporting, none of the acoustic reports submitted to council prior to or during the 15-month trial have actually measured the sound of 30 dogs on the site. Instead, we find the acoustic assessments that the council relied upon were observations, and I quote, based on 10 dogs being kept on the site, and that further assessment would be required if a greater number would be kept on the site. Had this information been made public before and not privileged information, there would justifiably have been public outrage. Before the trial started, we had reports of dozens of dogs on site, and the trial approved capacity is 30 dogs. Importantly, we also know that the Resonate report concluded that compliance is not expected with 30 dogs under the established noise criteria. Furthermore, this compliance would also assume that the dogs are residing in the noise-treated runs, and while we know, and has been discussed this afternoon, that a lot of the time the dogs are outside in the unapproved pine fence area. So secondly, with respect to acoustic data collection, despite the directive from the local planning panel that acoustic recordings be taken from the properties of the closest receptors, on all 3 occasions the receiving equipment was actually placed well below the level of the facilities and the surrounding properties, which are all set about 20 metres above the creek height. This is a concern given that we know that sound travels in a straight line and will be less audible from the road level than the surrounding properties and those that are directly opposite, and Tony has spoken to this. Confirmation of the level of noise from the properties themselves was noted on the 11th of May in 2022 by Mr. David Harris, MP, as recorded in Hansard, and again I quote, "I met with the residents and heard the barking dogs, which was pretty amazing given the loud noise made by the insects in the area. The residents need a resolution. The operation needs to be stopped and the issue followed up as quickly as possible." So that's in the Legislative Assembly Hansard on the 11th of May 2022. So far as I'm aware, the officer visited our property on 2 occasions, one being for a community meeting. The other visit was unannounced on the 19th of May in 2022, and there were only a few barks, but they were still audible across the valley. When 2 dogs become 10 become 20 or 30, they start setting each other off, and it's quite a different matter. In fact, you can even hear it from the top of the ridge, an area that's a AAA conservation rated land. Now, finally, with respect to the representation of available information, in my opinion, the comments by the Council's Environmental Health Officer paint a less than balanced view of the operation of this facility. Numerous complaints have been lodged, and as has been mentioned several times now, a detailed 64-page barking diary was maintained during the trial and made it available to the Council both for their information and for the planning panel. So I hope you have a chance to look through this to see some of the patterns of consistencies in the noise. I'm surprised that this doesn't appear to have been referenced or provided. Recordings have also been submitted on multiple occasions. As mentioned, of course, it's dogs in the outside area which are most audible, and these dogs are free to run in the very extended area since the erection of the unapproved pine fence. Use of the second property in the garage for dogs has also been reported since 2019, with these buildings not included in any DA. The use of these parts of the property was confirmed via email from the Council's enforcement officer on the 5th of October in 2022, who stated that he had been informed by the applicant that these pets were in quarantine. Now, these dogs have clearly been unwell for some time. In the last 2 or 3 months, as the property has become prepared for sale, the number of dogs has reduced and it's become somewhat quieter. So in closure, I fully support the amended recommendations of A1, A2 and A3 and encourage the CCLPP to support these additional reasons for the refusal of DA 972020A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tatum. Any questions? Thank you. Oh, sorry, no, we do have questions.
Just one clarification. I think you mentioned that in the past you alluded to the fact that there were perhaps dozens of dogs in the facility. I was just wondering how you have that information, what it's based on. Thanks.
That's from local superintendent. I think I'm hearing the question. Is someone in the room?
The question was, how do you know how many dogs are on site? You mentioned dozens at one stage. So how did you come about that information?
They have been witnessed by locals in the area and visitors to the site, to my understanding.
Thank you. Another question?
I'm just interested in, since the time-limited consent was granted, and since the works were done to the evening shed, is noise an issue? Can the dogs be heard when they're in the evening shed? And what time in particular during the 24 hours do you actually hear the dogs?
As we've heard, I think it's relatively unpredictable, less so during the evening. Certainly in the unapproved pine area, we can hear them very clearly. The 64-page report will track sort of based on time gaze as to when we hear it, and get a sense of the consistency, but also the unpredictability of it. I hope I've answered that question.
I think you have. Thanks. No more questions, Mr. Tatum. Thank you. Now we have the applicant's representatives. I'm not sure how you want to come out together or one at a time. It's up to you. Okay, thanks. So if you can just identify yourself and also help us and more wider understanding just your role.
Hello, my name is Chris Lewis and I'm the owner and applicant of 604 Arimba Creek Road. I'm a registered breeder with MDBA, Masters Dog Breeders Association, and I have a love and passion for breeding French Bulldogs. I'm speaking on behalf of my mum, who has also dedicated her life to working with animals. We purchased 604 Arimba Creek Road in April 2019 to create a safe and private property to home French Bulldogs. We chose the site because of its 17 acres and occupies both sides of Arimba Creek Road. As time passed, we were contacted by council and were made aware that a DA required to be lodged when we engaged the services of a town planner to continue with the application process. In 2020, we were granted conditional approval, DA approval for 15 months. As the condition of timing was close to expiring, we lodged our application and were actively communicating with council and pushing to seek clarity for the DA on 604. We believe we have done everything in our power to follow instructions and provide a world-class facility that complies with RSPCA, MDBA and Central Coast Council. Whilst making improvements from the first DA approval, we were required to make changes to the facility based on written directives of RSPCA. Once these changes were completed, the RSPCA granted us with 100% compliance. All my French Bulldogs are registered pedigree. They are all DNA tested and 5-panel clear of all inherited diseases. We are proud to be a leader and contribute to bettering the health of the French Bulldog in Australia. The practice of insemination birth does not take place on the property. This is done at a fertility clinic in Sydney. We do not bring clients onto the property to avoid any future security risks. This minimises any potential impact on the local community. We FaceTime and interview all potential clients, enabling us to show them the facilities. We then deliver the puppies to their homes. This ensures the puppies will provide with the right care and give us the opportunity to interact with customers homing the puppies. We love witnessing the connection between the puppies and their families and how much joy it brings to their lives. This is the most rewarding part and our why. Why we do what we do, to help them find a lifelong friend and companion. We have had a customer with tears of joys, and finally meeting their soulmate is an absolute joy for me. We have also provided emotional support dogs and therapy puppies to children with autism and other intellectual disabilities that would benefit from a therapy dog. Buying a French Bulldog is a long-term commitment. Currently in Australia, the oldest French Bulldog is 13 years of age. However, the oldest French Bulldog in the world has lived to 18 years of age. I manage the property with my mum and grandma and currently employ 2 locals from the community 7 days a week to assist with the everyday running of the property. That includes cleaning, feeding, exercising the dogs. We have a daily plan of management, and working with animals, consistency is key. My mum has over 30 years of experience working with animals as a dog groomer and trainer, which has assisted me in expanding my knowledge of dog behaviour and dynamics. We have installed a camera system that has sound and motion detection, allowing us to monitor movement and sound, resulting in and being able to effectively manage sound if required. We have installed additional technology to the property, which enables swift and consistent communication. I am here today to show how passionate I am about the French Bulldog breed and how our dedication to providing a world-class facility with a large focus on betterment of the French Bulldog breed and providing the best possible care for our French Bulldogs. We are not conducting an illegal activity, and we believe that we have chosen the current location to home and raise our French Bulldogs. The Central Coast Council needs to understand that if they deny this application, they're denying our right to continue our passion for dog breeding. And if 604 Ourimbah Creek Road isn't the place for us to home our French Bulldogs, then where is? We appreciate both the time and patience of the Central Coast Council with the process of the application and the commitment of the local planning panel. We might not have done things in the right order, and we apologise to the community for the 4 years that it's taken to finalise this application. But we believe our property should be approved and the time condition consent be removed, as the site is appropriate and permissible for use. Thank you.
Yeah, the suggestion's just been, maybe if you can stay up there, we'll hear from the other representative, and then we
Okay.
might have questions of either or both of you, and that way we'll hear what you have to say and then have questions, and then you can decide who best answers those questions afterwards. Good idea.
Thanks for the panel for the opportunity, and thanks for all the speakers for their submissions. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant. We obviously don't support the recommendation, and actually what we're seeking is a deferral of the current application. Sorry. Can everyone hear me? No. Would you like me to start again? No. So yeah, we're here to request a deferral just on a number of matters. Obviously, everyone who has spoken today and spoken so well today has outlined the timeframe that's gone on. I'm only recently just been engaged, but it's been a long process. I will say there's been numerous assessing officers that have looked at this application. And there are some information, I think, from the ejector's side and also from the applicant's side that has been available. And in particular, obviously there is an acoustic report that's been noted in the assessing officer's assessment that needs to be resubmitted. We currently have that prepared and we're happy to resubmit that. We're happy to resubmit that. That's being prepared by Resonate. Might I note that's the third acoustic consultant who prepared a report independently, I suppose, selected as part of the original DA, and they can provide evidence in relation to the 30 number of dogs that have been part of the original approval. Secondly, there is an original bushfire report that was prepared in 2020. That bushfire report has noted recommendations in relation to the fencing. And obviously that has been raised by a number of objectors this afternoon, and we thank them for those comments. But again, that is available to be assessed, and we would like the opportunity to provide that, particularly to council staff, because obviously it's noted in the report that may not have been provided. So ultimately, we're looking for the opportunity to provide the additional information. And also, we'd also like to draw the panel's attention to the fact of what we're dealing with in terms of the works and the scale of those works. We're talking about the internal shed, the changes to the configuration of that shed, and as Chris has noted, those changes were the direct result of a request from the RSPCA. The RSPCA obviously attended the site. After making those changes, they've assessed the site as being 100% compliant. And those changes we're talking about internally, they result in non-structural walls of low height of less than a metre. So we're talking about works that ordinarily may be considered to be exempt from the provision of consent. I'm not saying they are in this current application, obviously because of other overlays such as bushfire may prevent that from happening. However, the nature of those works are minor. In relation to the concrete hard stand areas surrounding the shed, that is a replacement of an existing bitumen hard stand that surrounded the top area of that shed. So in effect, we're seeking to do minor modifications and or upgrades that were already there on the site. I also draw your attention to the retaining walls and to the fences. Those retaining walls, again, ordinarily may be considered to be exempt for the provision of any approval given their height. However, they're integrated with fencing. We would like the opportunity to review that and to provide evidence how potentially they may sit outside the need for formal consent. Also, there's a comment made in relation to the fencing and the fact that the fencing is of a nature and is of a material that, again, may not comply with the provisions for bushfire planning. Again, our bushfire consultant has made a comment on that in his 2020 report, and we'd be happy to also expand on that to provide justifications around that. So we're asking the panel today to consider that, to acknowledge that there has been a length of time, and we do acknowledge the length of time that it's taken. However, obviously we've had multiple assessing officers to deal with, and the opportunity to provide the information that council has requested to hopefully be able to address those concerns and to finalise the application.
Thank you. Questions from the panel?
Yes, I might start. Chris, I might just start with you regarding the temporary approval that was issued. Subsequent to that further works were undertaken on the site. Unauthorised works have been undertaken on the site since the consent was granted, the temporary approval consent was granted. Can you just outline what works they were that were undertaken on the site, and why did you undertake those works?
Yeah. So John just explained some factors that are in question, which is the inside of the evening house, and then the retaining walls, which are fences included, and then some of the concrete that was bitumen. So there's some of the things that we amended. Our main reason for that was RSPCA. So they came onto site and said that we would like to see these changes, and there was written directive. I'll just have a look. I think it was 70, we had 70 days or 72 days or something. It's here, I can provide that evidence. And yeah, it was all around square meterage. So every dog has to be kept in a certain square meterage in an evening house. I mean, that's a legal requirement. But once in the re-inspection, where we were given 100% compliance, there was measuring tapes of those structures. So in saying that the way it was constructed before was different measurements to what was wanted to be seen by RSPCA. So we felt compelled, and with written directive, we did that because, yeah, I wanted the dogs, you know, I didn't want my dogs to be taken.
It's important to understand that area isn't an increase. So there's no increase in the capacity within that overnight stay area. It's more about the configuration and also the material and the type. Also important that hard stand, there was water provided, there was coving in between each of the areas where the dogs sleep. So it really was there to be brought in to comply with the requirements of the RSPCA. So not to increase the number of dogs that stayed there, not to adjust the intensity of the use, rather to modify the materials and the proposed configuration as they sit within that shed.
I guess I just make the observation that those works were undertaken without consent. Did you at all advise council that you would be going to do those works, or did you seek any advice from council in relation to those works?
I did the best I could to navigate through things. I did have a town planner engaged, and I did my best to communicate what was happening. So whether
through your consultant town planner, you sought to have those matters resolved. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the temporary approval was granted by the local planning panel on a trial basis, and that was on the basis that giving you opportunity to operate and show to the community that you could operate without impacting on the amenity of the area in terms of noise impacts. Mm-hmm. So we've got a lot of submissions. We've heard from a lot of people here today that their amenity is still being impacted by that. In your submission to us, you haven't made any response to that. I'd like to hear your response to that issue, because that's a fairly high threshold issue with this application as to whether we grant this consent on an ongoing basis, because you were given that trial period to prove that you could operate without having that impact.
It's very hard.
So, sorry, what's the question?
I'm just a bit confused.
Well, I'd like to hear you respond to that issue, that's been raised by the residents are
yeah,
still saying
appreciate
adjoining owners. We've heard from a number of them, people that live in and around that, some quite compelling submissions, that they're still being impacted by it. Mm-hmm. And there's a log of 694 incidences or something. So I'd like to hear your response to that.
Maybe I can start, because obviously, I've been brought in the last 2 weeks. So what I understand, and Chris, what I understand is that they're, from a formal complaints point of view, Chris has as required by the original DA, have a formal complaints register and have a number. Now, in terms of the impact and that impact on surrounding residents, you've been relying on that formal complaints register and that process. Now, as indicated in the report, there has only been one formal registered complaint. That's not to say what has been outlined by objectors is not true or accurate. We're not saying that, but in terms of addressing your concerns, the applicant can only go off the fact that if they have been addressed by surrounding residents and if they have been contacted by way of the formal complaints register that has been put in place as part of the original DA. Okay, and as the applicant, as the owner, there has been limited contact. So in terms of how that's run, you can see on the site that there is a range of management strategies that have been placed on site, whether that be through the videos, whether that through audio, whether that be through communication with employees on the site, and how to address that. There is a requirement there. If someone contacts Chris, Chris can contact the site straight away and can address any issues straight away. So in terms of how they're trying to address matters, if anything is raised with them, you can see on site they've implemented strategies to do that. They've enabled them to do that, whether someone be on site or whether they not be on site. And if anything's brought to their attention, they will address it. I don't know if you want to add anything further to that.
Yeah, like in my speech, I said consistency is key. So when I hear the objector say it's very sporadic, I find it hard, because if I had that information, which, like John said, there has been limited communication over the last 2 years, I obviously want to do my best in the trial period to show the community that this facility is manageable, and that's why there is so many procedures in place and so many implements of things like fast internet, Wi-Fi, satellites, radios, everything that we're using on the property, sound alerts, things like that, is to try and make this manageable, which it clearly shows it can be managed.
So, and your management, you've got people working on site.
Yeah,
I would understand would be able to address if any noise comes up.
Correct.
But, I've been working in this industry for 30 years and we're not dealing with one complaint here, we're dealing with numerous ones. So why is that failing? That system failing? Why are we still why are there still people complaining about noise from the facility?
Again, maybe I can comment just as a third party that it's not being used, the complaint register is not being used.
But can I just ask? It's the same. So how much time have you spent in other people's properties checking out if there's an issue? You, yes.
Myself?
Yeah.
I have been up to areas. I've driven up to the top of Moores Point Road, and the power lines are almost as loud as some of the birds and things like that, so I don't...
No, I'm not asking, I'm just asking a factual question. First of all, let me break the question down. Have you only ever responded to formal complaints of people? Have you proactively approached any of your neighbours to see?
Well, that would be trespassing, so I haven't trespassed on anybody's property.
Right. I'm not trying to catch you out. I'm trying to establish some facts and...
Yeah, what I'm saying is, like John said, that is the way. So we were told to put our phone number, like a management number, on the front fence. That has my number. Then it has the phone. Then if there's any issues, they can contact. There was communication through that initially. And then it hasn't been responsive for, I think I've been charging that phone for just about 2 years now, and I haven't received one text message or phone call.
Right, but in terms of number of times you think you've been in another person's property that either has complained or you've sought to see what it might be like from their property, how many times?
I have driven in areas, yes.
So you've been on road, so you've been in public areas around to try and gauge the noise
that's legal,
impacts.
and then I'll be in my car, I might put my window down.
But you haven't actually been on someone's porch or, said, this is what I'm hearing, or try to find out for your own what that might be like?
I didn't get permission for that, no.
When did you put that phone number up on that sign on the
So
fence?
it's been there since the original. I wouldn't have the exact date, but it's been up for about maybe 3 years or over 2.5 years, yeah.
Right, okay. Jonathan, question to you. You've read the report, the council report, I assume, and your response to the issues raised, and I'll just refer to it as the Windy drop-down case in relation to this particular application, and including the further unauthorised works to be approved as part of this modification application in relation to this DA. Your view on that as this process as opposed to a separate DA and BIC process?
Well, I look at it as I support council officer's comment that no one ever wants to undermine the primacy of New South Wales planning legislation, and that's not our intention. What we're looking to do here is to look at the items, and maybe if we look at the items as individual pieces, I mean, we're talking about, let's say, hard stand concrete area, and we're talking about the replacement of existing bitumen, yes, albeit there would be areas which had not necessarily been concreted but now have been. But if we look at that in isolation, are we undermining the fabric of the New South Wales planning legislation by giving consent to the use and to the construction of concrete areas? I would say that maybe we're not. I'd say that if we look at the issues such as the retaining walls and also the fencing, granted, again, we're not backing away from the fact that you would need to have particularly the pine fences assessed, and we're happy to do that from a bushfire perspective. That has been raised in our previous reports of 2020. But if I look at the retaining walls, if we look at the retaining walls on site, the majority of them might be, if not slightly above or just below 600. And as we both know, the exempt provisions allow for retaining walls of less than 600 high. And also, if we're then looking at the internal modifications, we're talking about non-structural walls. We're talking about low height non-structural walls. That again, if we looked at the exempt and complying provisions, that ordinarily they would not require consent.
So your submission to us today, just to confirm, you're seeking the panel to defer determination of this application at this stage, giving you the opportunity to submit further information, including an amended bushfire threat assessment report that deals with the unauthorised matters on the site, in particular the fencing that's been raised, an updated noise assessment report. Is there anything else?
That's correct. And then to make a comment as to, as you've just put there, how would you address those other issues that sit in the application around approval, such as the hard stand area?
Okay, thank you.
Keep going around.
A question for you, Chris. Regarding the number of dogs that have been present in the facility in the past and the current numbers, second part to my question, when there is an instance of barking and noise, which I'm sure there are, how do you mitigate that? What do you do? What are staff supposed to do?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So on site currently we have 15 dogs, and this is shown at the front gate, which is an RSPCA directive, which shows the number of dogs on the property. So if there was ever an emergency or something would happen, we would know the amount of animals on the property. There is crates to then take them off. So that's the number. So we really need to understand that from day to day, because that is very valuable information. The evening house is constructed for 26, so that is what the evening house can be at. And then, like I said, our numbers are at 15. In terms of sound...
and in the past, what is the numbers that you've had?
So it would be below those numbers, yeah.
It's important to note that there will be no more than 26 dogs on the site, even though consent has been granted for 30. Right? I just want to make it clear that the evening house does not allow for any more than 26.
And then in terms of sound mediation, if there is an alert from the camera systems for sound, we would get notifications on our phones. We would then use a radio, so two-way radio, to communicate, or via phone, and then that would notify the worker. So if we're at different parts of the property, so say if I'm on the property, I may be in the office doing things, something happens, I can then notify, and then the staff will basically just have a look, We know every single dog's name on the property. We're very knowledgeable about what's going on. Obviously, the worker will, say, "Are you all good? Have a look, give it a pat." When the biggest difference with these dogs is that they're well associated. These are dogs that have grown up on the property, bred their grandparents. They're not in and out dogs that have different behaviours. These guys, this is where they live, they hang out. We love them. We put a lot of care and resources into them full time. So in terms of their behaviour, we understand their dynamic. And that is where I said in my speech, where I lean on my mum's over 30 years of training of dynamics. And for me, that is an important factor of mediating sound. If you understand behaviour and you know that, certain things go well, they go well together or not, I think that is definitely a big factor. And that's how we mediate sound, is by understanding their personalities, working with them, exercising them. And that's how we do it.
So you answered my question.
Oh, sorry.
Wouldn't mind following it up. It's probably good for us to do issue by issue. I'm not quite sure I've finished with the noise. The noise and numbers, I'm not sure I'm quite clear on both of them. But on the noise issue, I heard from a number of people they felt like because of the nature of the shape of the valley that there was some echoing effect. And I think we've all been in places where you do notice more noise more acutely than others because of the landform. So do you accept that or not? Have you noticed that you can hear things that you wouldn't expect to hear?
I would rely on a professional's
No, I'm asking
opinion.
you as someone who's lived there for 4 years.
I believe that, like I said, it occupies both sides of Arimba Creek Road. So it's 17 acres and it's placed in the back corner. So our main objection is across the other side of our property and through a massive tree line that is very, very
Back to the
dense.
question.
Yeah.
Do you accept or not that there's that the level of noise is somehow affected by the landform and you can hear things as if they're closer than they actually are?
I think the sheer size of the property allows for sound.
You don't
to
ever
be,
hear any neighbours doing things and think, oh, it's a bit odd.
No,
It sounds like they're
otherwise
closer than they are. Never.
they could have just complained to me from their house.
Yeah, again, look, these questions, can I just say, we're not looking for you to try and provide an answer to every question of why we should approve your DA. We're just trying to establish some
I understand.
facts.
But I'm saying if you could vividly hear somebody speaking on their balcony, then we could have had conversations about sound mediating across the valley. And we can't do that. We have a phone that they are welcome to call.
I think what you're trying to say is that you can't hear.
I can't hear anybody.
Can you hear your neighbours?
I don't hear any objectors yelling, "Shut up," or anything like that. Yeah, I don't hear voices across the valley.
Right, you don't hear
So I don't
cars
know
or-
how they.
Right, you don't think there's anything unique about the sound environment?
No, I don't.
And I guess on the numbers, so just tell me, you've been there since early 2019, I understand. How many dogs did you have then? What's been the numbers from day one to now of dogs? Not puppies, just the dogs you've got on site. How many?
It would range
from the beginning to now.
It would range from say 10 to our number now 26.
You don't have 26 now.
It would no, don't have 26. I was 15 now.
No, I'm asking actual dogs, not potential capacity. Actual dogs on the site.
What do you mean, actual dogs?
You know them all by name.
I'd have to go in and log.
But what he's trying to say is, have you fluctuated the number? Has it been consistent?
What's been the maximum number you've had? Actual dogs on site, not
So
26.
at the moment you have 15. Has it always been 15?
Yeah.
It's been close to around, but it could.
Well, it was 10 when you did the resident report, so it was a different number then.
Yeah. So it does fluctuate. So
how many did you have when you came onto the property?
Probably around.
I'm
10.
not trying to catch you
Yeah,
out.
no.
This isn't a trick question.
I'm just trying to recall 4 years ago. Yeah, probably around 10. That could be reasonable.
Right, and 10 the noise report, which is 2019, 20 and 15 now. So am I hearing that that's been the actual number on site, around between 10 to 15?
Roughly around, yes, correct.
And there haven't been adult dogs that you don't have anymore that you've got rid of. So could there been more than 15? Has there been dogs that you had on site that you don't anymore?
Yes, correct.
There has been. So there's been more than 15?
No, so like if it's in a generational movement, then it would, but that is our number that we find is manageable.
15.
Yeah.
15. But so I mean, you're passionate about the breed, you're passionate about that. So they're your dogs, yeah, those 15?
Yes.
So you're not looking to sell them or get rid of them and move them on until they die, is that right?
No, they're my
They're your
own, the
dogs. So it'll
yeah.
only ever be more if you get more and potentially less if they, pass away.
Yeah.
Right. And so the 26, from my understanding, is based on the night room. I keep forgetting the terminology, but where they sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the pens, the sort of outdoor pens and the outdoor play areas. So how many does the pens accommodate?
Well,
to meet the RSPCA?
Yeah, the requirement is it would be over 2, but we have 2 to 3 in the outside pens.
So what's the capacity? What's the max? I understand the
sure.
maximum capacity
Yeah.
of the night area is 26, based on one side being for 2 to
correct,
meet
and then
RSPCA guidelines, the other's for 1, and that's 26 inside at night. What's the maximum capacity for the outdoor pens? Because that's where they are in the day.
I would have to clarify that information.
You don't know?
We put 2 in each pen.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. So, and the other thing I'm kind of also, as I understand it, just from the side observation, I mean, dogs have personalities as well. So some dogs suited to be on their own and some are suited to be together. How do you make that call of which ones are in double pens and which ones on single?
Yeah, so it's a behaviour. So we're working with dynamics, hormones, things like that. So obviously an alpha male with an alpha male wouldn't, work. Obviously, if a female is coming into season, she's going to be slightly temperamental.
Okay. So it's a combination
It's
of natural and their temperament. So the 26 would also mean that the only way you'd hit that maximum capacity is if the personalities of all those dogs and the circumstances also matched to that every double pen would be filled with 2 dogs.
Correct.
You'd have to, and that'll be a hard thing to actually design though, because you're not quite sure of their personality when you get them, do you? Or how they're going to go in the group and whether they're better suited.
Yeah, that's what we specialise in working through is the dynamics.
So how would you? So I guess if the group dynamics and having your dogs happy, how do you choose how much to grow? Like if you've got 15, how do you work out how many extra dogs and how they're going to get on?
Maybe I can jump in. I can see where your questions are going. At the moment, you have 15 dogs.
Yeah.
And I understand the objectors may have a different view, but from Chris's point of view, they're well socialised and they work well together.
Yeah.
So really, you're not going to. You are limited as to how many more dogs that you would add to that.
Is that right? You just sort of do one at a time, or 2? What would you do?
Well, because those again, those dogs are going to be they're on the property for an extended amount of time, aren't they, Chris? How long are they on the property?
1, 2, 3, 4 years
or more.
Yeah, or more.
So.
Oh, you don't have them, so did they turn over so the dogs, 15 dogs you have there, they're going to be there for, how long will they be there? Forever, or you keep them till?
They would be there for a long period of time. There may be points where if we feel dynamics aren't associated, then we would rehome them, so pet home.
Okay.
That is an option.
Is that based on their personality and getting on, or based on their breeding?
Both.
Right.
I just think if you're trying to then say, well, what's your number of dogs? You have a set number set in the original development consent, which is 30. You have effectively what you can accommodate at night, which is 26. I know this is probably a bit confusing, but ultimately, what is the number at which you would operate effectively and how you would manage all the personalities in the dogs and to ensure that your dogs can obviously be managed within the infrastructure you've got there. At the moment, it's 15. Right. Okay, because obviously the setup of those runs outside, some dogs will be sitting in one of the runs by themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there'll be other runs where there's 3.
The reason for my question, I was just trying to understand the history of it and the numbers and where things might go and how you make the decisions about the numbers and what the associated impacts are going to be. And I guess there's an argument particularly, I think the whole notion of a trial for any use, whether it's a pub or a dog breeding facility, is there's certain uses where management of that use is really important, because how effectively you manage the environmental impact is important, and that's the idea of a trial, to see how the management practices go to manage and mitigate the impacts. And it's also to sort of test the capability of the site for the consent, but you do have a situation where you've got consent for 30, or 26 might be the maximum capacity, but then you have a trial to gauge the impacts of that use, but it's only been at 10 to 15. It hasn't been at the full capacity of the approval. So you haven't really been able to directly measure or gauge the impacts of the capacity of the DA during the trial period. What do you say? And then you're relying on a noise report, which is fine, they can make measurements, but in order to make assumptions about the noise impacts from whether it's 10, when the resident did their report, or 15 to 26, you need to make assumptions and projections, so you're reliant on assumptions. So what do you say to that, that the numbers that have been there haven't reflected the capacity of the DA and therefore don't sort of reflect the true impact of the approved use?
But I'd also
it's not operating at capacity.
Yeah, but I'd also say that may end up being the operational maximum that the site runs at.
Which?
15.
Right.
Because of, as I said, because of the nature of what you currently have there.
Is that what you're saying to us today, that one of the amendments you're looking at is to change the numbers, or is it something you're thinking about?
No, I think to your point, which is how do you validly assess a use when you've been given consent for a particular number?
Yeah.
Okay, and I just wanted to answer that question.
Yeah.
It's more about, okay, well, you're right, this is not like a time-based period where you have a hotel and you close at 2 a.m. and then you look at the associated impacts in relation to that. This is in relation to animals and what is best for the animals and what is the best way to house and to have those animals on site. And at the moment, it's considered that with the current type and the number that there is, 15 is appropriate. Now, whether that's considered to be a compromise, we haven't discussed that, okay? But
I'm just trying to tease out that issue of numbers and how numbers might change. I mean, if you use the pub example, you get a trial period till 2 a.m. For 12 months, and the pub says, well, let's not open till 12, let's open till 11 to keep the impacts down so the neighbours don't complain, and then once we've got a permanent approval, we'll open till 2.
Yeah, okay, but I don't think that's, again, as much as anyone...
No, I'm not saying that's been a conscious thing, but it's still reflective of the same sort of issue that you're trying to gauge the impacts of the capacity of the development approval during a trial period to measure the impacts based on management and on-site observations, I guess, but it hasn't operated to 30, let alone 26, but probably
again,
about 15 has been the max by the sounds of things. Right.
Correct, but it will never, I think it's really important that, to your point, you'll never be able to house the 30 dogs on site anyway.
No, 26 would be the maximum.
Yeah,
Well, that's based on the night, but I'm still not sure what the capacity of outdoor pens, because it's a combination of both where they are at the night and where they are on the day.
It would exceed 26
Sorry?
It's bigger, it's much larger.
The outdoor area has a bigger, you're saying the critical...
Yeah, so the square meterage of each outdoor pen is very large.
So you're saying the critical, the critical
Yeah, so when you were asking me the question, I'd have to divide it and then work out exactly what that is.
But you're saying that whatever that is, it's more than 26.
It well surpasses
the critical
the
link
inside.
is the inside.
Correct, yeah, that's what I was trying to get at
based
before.
on the RSPCA guidelines.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to butt in, we're just going noise and numbers. Is there any more questions on noise and numbers? Well, I guess the unauthorised works was part of it. I mean, I think part of those trials as well is building goodwill. You're not off to a great start when you do things without approval and in an ongoing basis. So all I can say to you at this public meeting is if you're not sure, ring the council and find out first, because things need approval. And saying you didn't know or was in a rush because I didn't want to lose my dogs isn't the best excuse. But in terms, and I don't think that all the works you've done have been in response to the RF. I can understand that in terms of the night house and so on, but there have been other works that aren't related, I think, that have occurred without approval. Okay, other questions? RFS, is there anything no, you've already said there you're happy to look at that as an update.
Yeah, as I said, our report of 2020 does make a comment in relation to fences at the end of, just before the final recommendations. But again, happy to do an update of that, to provide that to council staff to enable a full assessment to be completed.
And Jonathan, what's your role? Like in terms of your background, are you planning, project management? What's your role in this?
I'm taking over from the previous planner, so just...
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I do the great stuff and do these meetings.
Okay. Other questions?
Hi. I mean, a vast number of the objections, the primary reason has been about animal treatment, people being worried about that with this type of facility. And yet you say that the RSPCA has 100% approved the facility in operation. So obviously there's a big disconnect between those two things, and both those organisations are primarily concerned with animal welfare. So I just wondered if you could throw some light on how, you know, how do we weigh these things up, and how do you weigh these things up?
The facilities I am proud of that we have built, and like I said in my speech, I think they're world class in saying that animal welfare for our French Bulldogs is key. So I think the disconnect is in understanding animal welfare, and for me, RSPCA and like I said, MDBA, they are, you know, very high up organisations, and we have complied.
Sorry, can you just clarify the MD?
MDBA,
Yep.
Masters Dog Breeders Association. Everyone
Sorry,
can
continue.
Yeah, so that's why I said we're trying to work through these organisations to comply, and complying with RSPCA is a very important factor of what we're doing, and we are compliant. So if there was major concern on animal welfare, then when that inspection was done, we would not have complied, and our dogs would have been taken from the property. So when people say animal welfare, they said they haven't been to the property, they haven't inspected the facilities, they haven't seen how we do our day-to-day planning, and they haven't seen the condition of our dogs, and I'm proud of that. And so was the RSPCA.
I mean, I think, to be honest, that it would also, I don't know if it's possible, but if we could have heard from the RSPCA, for example, to support it, that would have been a good thing to do. I don't know if you can.
I have documentation to provide the compliance, and I also have all my written directives and communications with them. So if they wish to contact you, they can. Yeah.
But I'll note that that was originally supplied as part of the application. And again, happy to resupply that information. And I'm not, this is no comment in terms of council staff might have been lost through the number of assessing officers who have dealt with the application. But the...
That's okay, we can follow that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the intention was to build a world-class facility, then why didn't you check with the RSPCA first and meet their requirements before you built it rather than after?
Like I said, I've done my best to navigate. I'm a passionate dog breeder, and I have done the best to do all my research the best I can.
RSPCA guidelines you didn't check?
I did, yes.
Right.
And when they attended site, they educated me further, and we had a list of things to do, and we complied. So as far as I know, I'm doing my best to navigate through this issue, and yeah, we achieved compliance.
Okay, is there any, it's more an open question, so you've heard from all the submitters here, is there anything else you want to say in response to what was raised? You don't have to, I'm just asking, giving you an opportunity. If you felt like there was something you wanted to say, you haven't had a chance to.
Look, I'll just say that a lot of the objectors have raised the stress and the angst and the time period that this whole process has taken, and I acknowledge that. And I can only say that as a person that's been brought on in the last couple of weeks, that's the same for the applicant. Okay, so the applicant's in the same position, and like everyone, you know, what they're seeking here is a resolution. We understand that everyone's not going to be in supportive of the proposal, and we acknowledge that, but we feel that there's information out there to support our application. We would like the opportunity to refine some of that information, to resubmit that, and to enable the council staff to make a final assessment.
Right. And so with your request for, I mean, look, I think my observation is I think that where there's been delays, I can understand some level of frustration with council staff because of unauthorised works, trying to deal with those, building up certificates, reports that make conclusions that don't support what you're seeking. You know, a lot of the onus of that lies on you. It's not, well, tell us what we've got to do, council. You've got to be proactive about that. And also say, I think you should be proactive with your neighbours. But I'm not saying that to lecture in anyway. The question about what you're asking though, so you're asking for deferral to keep this, to what? To keep this modification alive, provide additional information so the panel can take a break, look at that additional information and then reconsider and redetermine and then make a determination of
Yeah,
this.
well,
Is that what you're seeking as
'cause-
opposed to a new application?
Yeah, because at the moment, the report says, look, there's insufficient information to make a determination. And those two things, from if we look at it just from a pure assessment point of view, is around the acoustic report that references the maximum number of dogs and has been raised here this afternoon in relation to the bushfire report. Yes, we note that ours has noted that, but to update that.
Okay, thanks. Any last questions? No, thank you.
I'm just wondering, like, is there anything else you think you could do about the noise? I mean, when we're on site, obviously your timber fences, I'm guessing they're about 6 foot high. I mean, you know, they build noise walls along highways all the time. So I'm just wondering whether there's other things that have been considered or whether the noise report, I know there's nothing in the noise report about that, but whether there's been other discussions. No, we don't want a 5 metre high noise wall, but, you know, there might be other things you could do.
Yeah, so in the outdoor pens, there's the water tanks behind, and then from there, there's another fence. So we put them in as basically like a sound barrier or, you know, a line of that to stop sound. And there's, and then obviously the fencing. So we believe we've done attempts to design that into the facility to help. And yeah, that's, I think we've done things like that.
I might be wrong too, but like from what I'm reading in submissions, what I'm hearing, there seems to be a bit of a theme about early morning, late afternoon. And I think even when we turned up, the dogs are quite noisy. I'm sure they get excited when you get a visitor. There must be sporadic things that are beyond their control that change the circumstance. They might get excited, and that might be from going from indoors to outdoors and from going from outdoors to indoors, because that's a change in their environment where they get excited for whatever reason. Is that what you, like, is that what would be your observation, the pattern of when the noise occurs? Is it moving from indoors to outdoors and vice versa, and when visitors
yes, correct.
arrive?
Yeah, so I would say it's coming from the evening house to outdoor playpens and then back in the afternoon.
And is there anything you can do about the management of that, you think, to reduce the noise, or it's just inevitable because they get excited as a group and start jumping
To be
around?
honest, when on site, it's not very, like it's, when I say consistency, it's a consistent thing. So when you open up a pen, the dogs run into their, like they know, they're trained. They know what to do. It's not as sporadic and as
But you
loud.
take them out 2 at a time, don't you, from the indoor,
Yes, correct.
overnight, and they don't
Yeah.
cross each other, so you
No,
decamp.
so we start from like the outdoor pens, we start from the one furthest and then we work our way down so they don't come past each other's pen. So there's things like that we do that we think definitely minimises.
So is it just excitability where that noise comes at that time? They're just excited to get out and they're excited to get back in, you think?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, thanks. That means we've heard from everybody and we've exhausted our questions of people who've spoken. I just want to pass on acknowledgement of thanks. I think that went well with council staff. That wasn't an easy thing. It helped us having the points and the online work with the hybrid thing, so thanks for organising that. I also want to thank everyone here because I know people can have totally valid and strong views about things they're passionate about. They might always accord with each other, but I think there's been a level of respect shown today, which I appreciate. Thank you very much. So thanks everyone for attending. What will happen now is we will, as a group, deliberate as a panel, as I mentioned up front. That will take as long as it takes till we come to a decision. The decision will be by majority. And then we also, as well as making a decision, which as I mentioned up front, there's only ever 3 options. It's approval, refusal, or deferral. We also need to outline whatever reasons we have for making that decision, and then the decision and the reasons will be published in the coming days along with a voice recording of this meeting. So having said all that, hopefully that makes sense and is clear. I'll declare this public part of the meeting closed at whatever time it is.